This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Nobody's really thinking about how an economy is going to work in a situation where AI is just destroying jobs left and right. Now, there's this feeling that, well, we've had technologies that disrupt work in the past, so a lot of people think this will just be the same. It's just AI will displace some jobs and create other jobs. But I don't think that's a good analogy, because AI isn't displacing one industry, and it's not doing it slowly over the course of decades. It's going to displace work in lots and lots of industries, all in a very short time frame. And that's a completely unprecedented thing.
This is Small Press, Big Ideas, a podcast about the business of local news in the United States. I'm your host, Paul Gewertz. Small Press, Big Ideas is about the opportunities and challenges that local news publishers are facing for their businesses. I'll sit down and talk with journalists, entrepreneurs, nonprofit leaders, and more in the local news industry to find out what's working, what isn't, and how the local news ecosystem can innovate and flourish in the 21st century. Today on the podcast, I'm joined by Greg Krehbiel. He is the president of the Krehbiel Group, which I just had it pulled up here, and then I messed up my whole computer. Helps growth-minded businesses align their technology and operations with their long-term strategy, so they invest in the right tools, fix what's holding them back, and build a foundation for sustainable growth. So, Greg, we've been on a group call, but first time talking one-on-one. Thanks for joining me, man.
Sure. Good to talk with you, Paul.
Yeah. So for the audience and myself, I always kind of start the podcast. If you could just give me a little background on your career, where you started. The show's based on local media, if you have experience there, but whatever's led you kind of to where you are now, I'd like to hear about it.
Sure. So I started in business-to-business publishing in Washington, D.C. with a little company called Thompson Publishing Group, Thompson with a P, not International Thompson. And we did legal loose leaf services for various markets. I was in the natural gas market. I worked in the natural gas area for quite a long time. We also did environmental books, grants books, HR books, that sort of thing. And they were monthly services, loose leaf things. You'd put pages in and out with a monthly newsletter. And it was a great way to learn a lot about publishing. I did almost everything you can do there. I was in editorial, production, marketing. I was in everything, in management and product development, IT. And then I moved to Kiplinger, and I worked with Kiplinger for a long time on both their business-to-business and business-to-consumer products. Kiplinger is more business-to-consumer, and did a lot more technology stuff there. My job was basically to be the liaison between the business people and the market and the IT people. So when marketing had some IT project they wanted to do, I was the guy who was the go-between. So that was a lot of fun. Did a lot of interesting things there, and did a couple of other somewhat related things. But recently I've been working with publishers, helping them with customer data platforms, also email service providers, other kinds of issues. Like I know you're into local news. I worked with some of the Waco publications. They're down in the South and the Southwest, and worked with them on retention and renewal issues, things about how to set up drip campaigns for their renewal series, that kind of thing.
That's awesome. I'm learning a lot about pronunciations today. I was like, Waco. I was thinking Waco, Texas. And because I think I've only read it and I've been pronouncing it Waco in my head in all these years, but I'm familiar with that.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, you're in a group call that I'm on frequently with Johnny Levy, who's been on this show before, around data, media and data and stuff.
Right.
But when I kind of reached out here, kind of to see if you want to come on the podcast, you said something you might want to talk about, which I'd love to dig into, is what's been on your mind lately is AI and whether there's a good path forward. And I was just looking at an open letter to Congress about AI. So let me let you take it from there a bit. What's that? What do you kind of mean by that?
Yeah, so
there's a path forward. Yeah,
sure. So everybody's thinking about AI. I mean, if you look on LinkedIn, every other post is about AI. So everybody's always talking about AI. The thing that bothers me is a lot of it just sounds like happy talk. And it's not really looking at how AI is going to completely disrupt not just publishing, but all kinds of things. It's going to disrupt customer service. It's going to disrupt legal services. It's going to disrupt truck drivers. You're going to have self-driving trucks. So all of a sudden, you're going to have 3 million truckers out of work because you have self-driving trucks. So nobody's really thinking about how that's going to work, how an economy is going to work in a situation where AI is just destroying jobs left and right. Now, there's this feeling that, well, we've had technologies that disrupt work in the past. The car got rid of farriers and blacksmiths and people who took care of horses, right? And the loom got rid of a lot of textile work, and discovery of petroleum got rid of whalers and that sort of thing, right? So technology has always been displacing jobs. So a lot of people think this will just be the same. It's just AI will displace some jobs and create other jobs. But I don't think that's a good analogy, because AI isn't displacing one industry, and it's not doing it slowly over the course of decades. It's going to displace work in lots and lots of industries, all in a very short time frame. And that's a completely unprecedented thing. It's nothing like what's happened in the past with technological innovation. So we're going to have lots and lots of people out of work, and we don't really know how to deal with that. We don't have any plan for how we're supposed to manage a situation like that. What if we had 35% unemployment or worse 3 years from now? Do we have any possible way to deal with that? And the other answer people come up with is universal basic income, which I don't think the math works just in general for universal basic income. But even if it did, they're talking about giving everybody $1,000 a month. That doesn't even pay your healthcare insurance, right? So
it's like that's not my groceries with my family of 4.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's a completely unworkable solution, and nobody's really thinking about this and figuring out what to do. So that's kind of the global big picture about why I think AI is a catastrophe in the making. I love it, by the way. I use it all the time.
Me too.
I use AI constantly, and I love it. It's a fantastic thing. I also think it'll be the death of us. So there's the kind of big picture thing, what AI is going to do to the economy and to the world. Specifically in the publishing area, I think people haven't come to grips with how AI is going to change the relationship people have to content. And I like to refer to that movie, Her, with Joaquin Phoenix. It was like in 2007, I think.
Is that the one? Yeah. Sorry. No, go ahead. It's a good movie. I have seen it. Yeah.
It is. And it's an incredibly prescient movie. Now it's back when the internet was very different than it is now. So it has a very different technological setup. It's basically just him talking to, turns out to be Scarlett Johansson as the voice of Samantha in his ear. And he ends up falling in love with her. It gets very complicated and very interesting. But that's the way people are going to interact with content relatively soon. I'm not going to go to this site and read their stuff and this other site and read their stuff. My AI agent is going to go out and find that stuff for me based on my preferences and based on what I want. Assemble it for me, transform it for me. Maybe it's text and I want it read to me, or maybe it's a video and I want it summarized, or anything like that. Transform it into what I want for my particular need. And that's the way I'll be consuming media. And the question is, how does publishing survive in an environment like that, where the publisher really isn't selling content to the user? The publisher is doing, if they're selling content at all, they're selling it to the agent. So it's just a radically different notion of how publishing is going to work and how people are going to try to make money off of content.
Yeah, and spoiler alert, if anybody hasn't seen the movie, he falls in love with the Scarlett Johansson AI. It does not end well for him, from my recollection. I'll just leave it at that. I won't give any big spoilers or anything. So the thing on this show, I talked to a lot of publishers and people like you, people who work with publishers. And I don't know how I want to frame it. It's like, yes, that everything you said is true. These agents are coming, the personalized agents, and it kind of gets away. But the thing I always hear from publishers is like, well, an AI isn't going to go, like in the context of local media, isn't going to go hit the ground, find the stories, have relationships with people and everything like that. So there's
Right.
still a need for that to get information. The
Yes.
question is maybe how they operate as viable businesses, these
Yes.
publishers and
Yes,
everything.
and that's actually a great point, because one of the things that publishers need to be thinking about is what can they do that AI can't. And one of those things is having reporters on the scene, looking at news, giving reliable, trustworthy content to feed into the AI monster so that people can find out what's really going on. There was this attitude early on in the development of the internet that everybody had something valuable to contribute. Well, I mean, Twitter has proved that false. Everybody doesn't have something valuable to contribute. There's a lot
No.
of just plain garbage out there.
Yeah.
And if you want actual information about what's going on, you can't really rely on the wisdom of crowds of 1,000 people who don't know what they're doing. If you want reliable information, you're going to have trustworthy sources. So local news is actually an interesting test case for how that's going to work with AI. Because if somebody wants to know what's going on in Minnesota or whatever, then they don't want to just hear what people are saying on Reddit or on Twitter
Right.
or on Facebook or something like that. They want to hear from somebody who actually knows, who's there, who's reliable, who can give them a straight take on the story.
Yeah. Excuse me. If you're a local publisher, a local news publisher, how do you think about positioning yourself? It's just kind of like a mousetrap in my head, or I can't think of a better metaphor than that, where it's like the need is there, but the industry is already hurting and the
Yes.
business model is already struggling. So do
Yes.
you think, does it go the way of like the AI tools increase efficiency and allow leaner teams to stay, efficient and still get the reporting out? Or does it also spiral back into that some kind of UBI or, there's a lot more philanthropy and stuff going on, but it can't do everything. It can't fund everything forever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like a catch-22.
Yeah. So I think there are two approaches. The first thing, I'm going to back up a little bit and just talk
Yeah.
about the history of the internet. I think it was a huge mistake for publishers to think that it was a good idea to put their content for free on the internet or for free supported by ads. That was just an enormous mistake for all kinds of reasons. But the main reason it was a mistake is because of the expectation that it built on the part of the public, which is that content is free. And also the expectation that it built between the publisher and tech companies in terms of copyright protection. That the tech companies just developed this idea that if it's out there on the internet, it's free for the taking to do with whatever we want to do with it. So publishers allowed Google to, just as an example, to index their content, to bring it into some engine over here that nobody understood outside of Google. There was no contract. There was no agreement. It was just that people just thought that's part of the deal. And that was incredibly stupid and short-sighted, because now we're in a situation where it's not just they're indexing your content so that you can show up on the first page of the search engine results. It's they're indexing your content to train an AI model. So we've let the cat out of the bag. I mean, we did decades ago. And unfortunately, now we're in a situation where we need to try to get the cat back in the bag. We need to change the terms under which these large language models can access our content. So there needs to be some real thinking about how to wall off the content from the large language models and make some sort of a deal, a content licensing deal with the AI models. Say, yes, you can access our content, but on our terms. This isn't free stuff that you get to just take whenever you want. There has to be some licensing involved. And the premise there has to be that what the local news publisher is providing is more valuable than what they're going to get from reading Twitter or whatever like that. So that they have to make that case that they're providing something that's better, that's going to be more reliable, more valuable to the LLM than what they can get from other sources. And then they need to say, you can't just take it from us. You have to make a deal. So that's one side of the equation. The other side of the equation is what you said about efficiency and how teams are going to use AI to improve their workflow, to work faster, to be smarter. And unfortunately, that's probably going to result in layoffs. Most CEOs, when you ask them what do they want from AI, what they want is a smaller body count. They want to have fewer people that they're paying for. And that's unfortunately the way it is right now. And I don't know if there's any way around that, but there's news companies are going to have to think about ways that they can use AI to make their process faster and more efficient. Unfortunately, I mean, I'm all for efficiency. I'm all for using systems well. That's all great stuff. But it also means people losing their jobs.
Yeah, and that just leads back to kind of the original broader problem you were talking about, society-wide problem.
Yes.
Like, yeah, maybe the information's still out there, but now there's 40% fewer people working at these publishers or whatever the number is.
That's right.
So I agree. I had somebody on the show who mentioned, I don't remember who it was right now, who mentioned like, local publishers. It was like a call to arms. He's like, you have what these LLMs need. Like, it's obvious. There's cracks. The problem is with local media, I mean, some of the people I talk to and stuff are like literally a one-person show. They're not like the New York Times or something that can make a deal with OpenAI and everything.
Right.
So I don't know if you've thought about it. How would like local media as a sector go about doing that? Just would it have to be on an entire state? These the press associations or whatever, they all organize and make these deals with these companies, or I don't know. These are big questions. Yeah.
There has to be some consolidation because you're right. One person or one small group or one small company isn't in a negotiating position. So publishers are lousy at cooperating. There've been a lot of situations over the past couple decades where publishers really should have cooperated. Like, for example, with the development of the iPad and how content was going to get onto the iPad. Well, the publisher voice was completely missing from that. Apple just said, this is the way we're going to do it. And publishers said, yes, sir. And they did it. And that was really stupid. And publishers need to join together and come up with what's in their best interest. And then as a unified front say, no, this is the way we're going to do business. And I don't know if that is publisher associations. I don't know if it's content licensing groups that can work with larger organizations. I mean, or it might be, as you said, state associations, but there has to be some sort of collective work and collective negotiation between the publishers and AI. But it has to start with stopping the flow right now. It has to start with, you can't take our content. You're not allowed to. It violates our terms and conditions. We're going to wall you off. First of all, we're going to change our terms and conditions so that we're telling you straightforwardly you can't do it. And secondly, to the extent possible technologically, I realize that's a difficult thing to do, but to the extent possibly technologically, we're going to wall you off so you actually can't get to the content.
Right. I know, I think Cloudflare was launching some kind of thing like that, where like a kind of bot blocker.
Yes.
I don't know the mechanics behind it, how it works or anything, but I know some people have kind of put that stuff out there. Or the other thing is, collectively put money in and lobby this thing to legislators too. Not that I have a whole lot of faith in Congress these days to get anything passed anyway, but it could be a way forward. I don't know. That's almost harder.
I share your suspicion about that. That article you mentioned before, I called it an open letter to Congress. I trust Congress to fix this like I'd trust the fox to fix the hen house. It's just, first of all, they don't know what they're talking about. Second of all, they really don't have the interests of publishers in heart. And third, even if they did something, it would take 4 or 5 years and this would be a done deal by then. So they're the wrong people to solve this. There has to be some public policy changes, just generally speaking, so we figure out what we're going to do when everybody gets laid off because of AI. However, for the relatively short term, by which I mean 6 months to a year, publishers need to come up with their own strategy, and they need to group together, and they need to come up with ways to say, look, no, we're not going to play your game anymore. You're going to have to do some things our way. There's going to be some negotiation. You can't just take things and do with it whatever you want to do.
Yeah. Another metaphor that popped up in my head is I would trust Congress to do something as much. I have a bad alternator in my truck right now, And it would be like, I could ask my 4-year-old twins to fix it for me. And that's about the level of trust if they could go do that for me.
Do you
Instead of
remember
taking it
when
out to-
Congress they had a hearing and they were asking questions of Mark Zuckerberg?
I do. How does Facebook make money, sir? And he just goes, we sell ads. Is that what you're talking about?
It was embarrassing. It was completely
embarrassing.
These are the people who represent us and make our laws, and they just didn't understand anything about what they were talking about.
Have you seen anything? You work with publishers. Have you seen any examples of people thinking about this in the industry, like publishers banding ideas together like this, or enacting their own ideas?
Yeah. I mean, to some extent, it happens at conferences.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm going to be speaking at the Niche Media Conference in April, and there's the MACMA, the Media and Audience Content Marketing Association. There are there's BIMs, there's other groups that bring publishers together where they get to talk. And I hope this kind of topic will be front and center and people will pay it a lot of attention. That's one of the things I'm going to be talking about at Niche Media Conference. But I don't see a lot of positive movement. I know Paul Gerbino at the Content Licensing Organization is trying to do a lot in this area. So there are people out there trying to do things. But in terms of there being a groundswell of change, I don't see it happening, because usually what I've seen over the past 30 years is the publishing response to a new thing is, oh, great, here's the new thing. How can we use it to sell our stuff? Right.
Yeah.
And that's what they did with Twitter, and that's what they did with the smartphone, and that's what they did with the iPad, and that's what they did with everything else. And it was never like, what's the long-term strategy? Is this really good for us? Do we really want Amazon to take our magazine subscribers, where we had a direct relationship between the publisher and the magazine subscriber, and now we want Amazon to have that relationship with the subscriber and we get some money from it? I mean, that was a stupid deal, but so many publishers jumped onto that kind of thing. So there's a real dearth of strategic forward thinking in the publishing industry. I don't know that it's unique to publishing. I think there's a dearth of that everywhere, but it's definitely true in publishing. People aren't really thinking of the long game and how this is really going to work out.
Right. Yeah, it's a tricky situation. So aside from that kind of, making deals with these companies and stopping the flow of information that they're just sucking up from everywhere, the tools and, like we were talking about, the efficiencies and all that are there, and those aren't going anywhere. At least I don't see how they would. How, say you're a local news publisher, local news outlet, how would you think about positioning yourself going forward to stay competitive, as sustainable even as a business?
Right.
Like, with kind of this in mind. Is that too broad? Does that make sense?
Well, no. So let me try to talk around it and see if I can get into that topic, because I think the first thing publishers have to do is set some rules. I'm working with a law firm right now and helping them come up with rules for how they should and should not use AI. So there has to be some expectations of what's appropriate and what's inappropriate. First of all, what can you use AI to do? But also, what kind of information can you post into a large language model? Because when you do that, it's like standing in a crowded room and shouting. You're giving that information to the LLM. It's going into its index when whatever you say to the LLM. So there has to be some thought about proper procedures and rules governing what can be used under what circumstances and how. In addition to that, there has to be transparency with the marketplace, so your readers know to what extent you're using AI to do things. Has a human actually reviewed this before it went out? And I'm not saying that a human always has to review everything. A lot of people say that. To some extent, that's true. There are some things that a human really ought to review, but there are some things that not absolutely necessary. For example, let's say you have a really long piece let's say it's 8 pages long, and you have a function on your website that allows a large language model to summarize it and give somebody the 5 bullet points. Well, a human doesn't have to review that as long as you disclose to the audience this summary is generated by AI, right? So there are things that you can do that require human intervention. An editor has to look at it, or somebody, a human has to oversee. And there are other things you can do that maybe not. Maybe you don't need a human to oversee it. But the really important thing is to be transparent with the user so that they understand what they're getting, understand what they're paying for. So those are kind of the first two things I would say. Set some rules and be transparent with the marketplace. And then the third thing would be, we've already talked about the content licensing side of it. To what extent can a local news organization leverage what they have, the expertise that they have, to go to an LLM and say, look, we can be your source for news, a reliable source for news in this place, but only on our terms. You got to pay for it, not for free. That's one thing they can do. Another thing they can do is use AI to be more clever about the way they approach their audience. I used to still work with customer data platforms, and AI can help with looking through your customer data and figuring out where your opportunities are. So I think a lot of what we've done in the past is people generating reports and trying to figure out where are our content gaps and what's more popular, and they're looking at kind of pretty primitive statistics, and having AI help with looking those things over, figuring out what content is resonating with the audience and why. That could be a way to help the publisher figure out a better content strategy to make sure that they're addressing the needs of their market.
Yeah, that's great. It's man, there's so many sides to all this stuff.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you too. I didn't ask you at the top. I almost said Krehbiel again. The Krehbiel Group. But what do you do for publishers? I'd like to. There might be some people out here too. Like, I'd read the thing off your website, but tell me about the work you do with folks too.
Yeah. So mostly I've worked with publishers on customer data platforms. That's been my big thing. I'm afraid that customer data platforms are kind of on the wane right now for a lot of reasons. But the idea of using technology to be sensible about your customer data and use your customer data in an intelligent way, kind of like what we were just saying about how a local news company could use information that way. That's something that I focus on. But mostly my real superpower, as Johnny would say, Johnny in the group that we are both members of.
Shout out Johnny.
Is being a liaison between the tech side of things and the business side of things. Because the truth of the matter is, the tech person who can communicate effectively to a business person is rare, and the business person who can communicate effectively to a tech person is rare. I bridge that gap. I'm not a super techie, and I'm not a super, business guy. I'm in the middle, and I can work with both sides, and that's what I do best.
Yeah, I thought you've got some great takeaways. I thought there might be some people out there listening that might be in need of something like that. A lot of folks I talk to in local news, local media are very, and I mean this is a compliment, they're very mission driven, but and they're not into all the nuts and bolts of everything. You know what I mean? Their reporters are speaking truth, putting stuff out there and everything like that. So it's a good person to have in your corner.
And unfortunately, that's what technology has done to us. It used to be, when a reporter went out somewhere, there was a reporter and a cameraman and maybe somebody else. Now it's just the reporter, right? They have to be their own cameraman. And a lot of these jobs, a long time ago, an executive would have a secretary answering the phone and typing things up for them and managing their schedule and all. And now it's, sorry, you got to do it all yourself. Here are the tools, but you got to do it yourself. So more and more people have to wear many, many hats. And that can be difficult because it's hard to be expert on many things.
Yep. That's great stuff. I've been kind of asking everybody this question, and it's kind of another big one, kind of a broad one. But flash forward 5 years, where do you see, I don't know that you're entirely optimistic based on some of the stuff in the conversation, where do you see the local media industry headed in terms of trends? Like what do you think is going to happen in the next, because it's going to be a crazy 5 years if the last 5 or so have been anything to teach us.
It is.
What do you think?
What's that famous quote? Everybody overestimates what will change in 1 year and underestimates what will change in 10 years.
I've seen it attributed to Bill Gates, I think. But one of those guys. Yeah, I don't know.
One of those guys. Yeah. So you picked right in the middle, 5. So that's a good number. I do think unfortunately, I hate saying this, but I do think it's going to be a bloodbath. Let's take, for example, an area like understanding a Roth versus a traditional IRA. Now, AI as it is right now can give you a decent answer to questions like that, because what it does is it scours all this information and it kind of homogenizes it and comes up with a generic answer. And that's fine for a question like that. But when you try to dig more into something more particular, more unique, something that's in a specific situation, you need more expertise than that. And that's what AI doesn't have. So publishers need to be able to say, look, you need a reliable source on the nitty-gritty details about whatever this thing is, IRAs or tax or whatever. So from the news perspective, the play is we know the nitty-gritty details about how this town works. We know who's in charge. We know who the movers and shakers are. We get reliable, firsthand information you can trust on the street. We have people out there looking, finding out what's going on. We give you original video, all this other kind of stuff. So I think that's the play for the local news media. And where do I see it in 5 years? I think, AI needs an expert on IRAs, but it needs maybe 3 experts. And right now there's like 1,000 of them.
Right.
So there's gonna be a huge winnowing of how many experts are necessary in any particular niche. And so a lot of publishers are going to go out of business because they're just it's kind of like, it used to be you had a local newspaper all over the place, and they all covered local and national news. I live in the DC area. We had 2 Washington papers. We had a Baltimore paper. So there's really no need for all these papers covering national news because you can get the national news on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember a time when I would read the Arizona newspapers on the internet because they were nice enough or foolish enough or however you want to say it to put it out there for free for me to read it. So what happened was, as all these players are covering the same stuff, a lot of them went out of business. Things winnowed out. We don't need that many people covering national news. The same thing is going to happen in every other area. Now, local news has a little bit of a benefit in that there aren't a whole lot of people covering local news. And you can only have so many sources for a particular limited geography or a particular niche, right? So the more you're in a specific area, I live in town called Laurel, Maryland. There's kind of like a half a newspaper here. So if you want to know what's going on in Laurel, then you need a source for that information. So that's where local news can, to some extent, weather this coming bloodbath a little bit better than other people who are covering a topic that's, more universal, like tax or regulation or something like that.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. That's awesome. Greg, where can people find you online? What should I link to and point people to? Anything else you want to promote?
Krehbielgroup.com. Krehbielgroup.com. It's hard to spell, so you'll have to put it in.
I'll definitely link to it in the show notes here.
Yeah, sure.
Cool. Awesome. This was great. I don't know how I feel about AI anymore.
Well, I tell you.
I mean, I have mixed feelings all the time on it, but
there's
some really good takes you had on it. It's good stuff. You're right.
I never used to understand the concept of a love-hate relationship.
Right.
I used to think, that doesn't make any sense, a love-hate relationship. Now I understand it. I love AI and I hate it.
Yep. That's the truth. And like I said, I can sit on here and complain about it all day, but right after this, I'm going to get on ChatGPT and get some help replacing that alternator I was telling you about.
There you go.
So, because it can help me out with that. Awesome. Greg, thanks for joining me. This is great.
Sure.
Have a good day. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks. Yep. Thanks for inviting me on. It's good conversation.
Yeah, no problem. Yep. Thank you for listening to Small Press Big Ideas. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to help the show, the best thing you can do is to tell a friend or colleague and just take a few minutes to leave a rating and a review on whatever platform you're listening to right now. It only takes a minute out of your day, but it really does help the podcast grow and reach more ears. Check back for new episodes every Monday.